Welcome to everyone joining us this evening for our panel discussion about the war in Nagorno-Karabakh, or Artsakh as Armenians refer to it. As you all no doubt know, on September 27th, Azerbaijan, with the full backing of Turkey, started shelling Nagorno-Karabakh, an autonomous region within Azerbaijan that's majority ethnic Armenian. This war has been raging on for nearly 6 weeks in spite of 3 ceasefires negotiated by each of Russia, France, and the US. This evening, we will hear from our distinguished panel of speakers about what is happening on the ground in Artsakh, the status of diplomatic efforts, the impact of this war on the church, and the secular and ecumenical efforts to resolve conflict, among other things. I am Elizabeth Shigalian-Branca, and I'll be facilitating the discussion this evening. I sit on the Parish Council of St. Gregory the Enlightener, which is sponsoring this event. Before I introduce our panelists, I would like to thank Father Mesro Povnesian, my parish priest, for his efforts in keeping our community apprised of what's happening in Nagorno-Karabakh and Armenia, and for providing the technical support to make this discussion possible. So we have 3 wonderful speakers with us this evening. We are honored to have Ambassador Behrzhan Nersessian as our first speaker. He has served as ambassador to the United States since January 2019. Ambassador Nersessian also previously served in Washington, D.C. as Deputy Chief of Mission from 2008 to 2012. He has a master's degree from Tufts University's Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. Immediately before assuming his current position, Ambassador Nersessian served as assistant to the Armenian Prime Minister in 2018. In addition, he was assistant to the Armenian president responsible for international affairs and matters related to the National Security Council from 2012 to 2018. We're also honored to have His Eminence Archbishop Biken Akazian. He was born in Turkey, and Archbishop Akazian has been the ecumenical director and diocesan legate of the Diocese of the Armenian Church of America Eastern District for over 20 years. Archbishop Akazian is a past president of the National Council of Churches of Christ in the USA, a leading ecumenical organization in the United States with 38 member churches and over 40 million individuals. Archbishop Akazian currently sits on the executive board of the National Council of Churches, as well as the board of the World Council of Churches, which is a fellowship of over 350 churches from 110 countries, representing over 500 million Christians worldwide. I'm pleased that Van Krikorian is also going to be one of our speakers. Mr. Krikorian serves as co-chair of the Armenian Assembly of America and has worked with this organization for over 40 years. In that time, Mr. Krikorian has initiated several pieces of human rights legislation, including Section 907 of the Freedom Support Act and the Humanitarian Aid Corridors Act. He was a member of the U.S. delegation to the 1991 CSCE human rights meetings in Moscow and served as Armenia's deputy representative and counselor to the UN in 1992. Mr. Krikorian is a lawyer, an adjunct professor at Pace University, and with his family, a longtime member of St. Gregory's Armenian Church in White Plains. Thank you, gentlemen, for making the time to be with us tonight and to keep our community informed about the war and the prospects for peace. I'd like to start the discussion this evening with Ambassador Nersessian. Thank you again, Ambassador, for being with us tonight. Sir, could you please let us know what is happening on the ground in Artsakh in Armenia and tell us how we as a community can help?
Thank you, Elizabeth. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening. Բարի երեկո բոլորին. Դերաշնոր Վիգեն Սրբազան Այկազյան, Հայր Մեսրոպ, Van Grigorian, Elizabeth. Good evening to everybody. And thank you very much to St. Gregory Church of New York to invite me this evening to talk. And I'm honored to talk together with Vigen Srpazan and Van to share our views at this panel, this hour. Thank you very much for your interest to all our community and whoever participates from our community at this discussion. The St. Gregory Church is known for our community as one of our long-standing, churches, has been very supportive to Armenia and Artsakh. since our independence, and I'm happy to talk here tonight to the parish and to the all participants. Of course, this discussion is very timely. What's going on right now in our homeland, in Armenia and in Artsakh. And of course, I appreciate very much the support of our Armenian American community since the day one of this war that has been in an unprovoked manner has been launched against us. We are from day one in touch with the community. Community is in touch with us, and everybody, you know, is very much supportive. All of the organizations, the churches, the parties, whoever in this community, that's a big strength. That's just our biggest strength, that Armenian American community stands behind Armenia and Artsakh at these crucial days of our history, of our destiny. And we're sure that together with our joint forces, we're going to overcome this challenge as well. So since September 27th, we in Armenia and Artsakh are confronting an unprecedented aggression in its scale. Unprecedented aggression. Why it is unprecedented? Because perhaps this is the biggest challenge we're facing since our independence. We have gone through many challenges since our independence, but why this is unprecedented and this is immense in its nature? Because we're not confronting one enemy first, we are confronting three enemies simultaneously. We're confronting the combined joint forces of Azerbaijan, Turkey, and Islamist and jihadist terrorists that are right now, as we talk, are fighting against Nagorno-Karabakh self-defense forces in Artsakh. It's unprecedented because the nature of warfare has changed, and Azerbaijan, using its petrodollars and the corrupt money, and we know the stories about the money laundering of Azerbaijani dictatorship, using all of this accumulated wealth, they have brought a new nature, a new character to the warfare, namely the, you know, the drones, the high precision missiles, and so-called network-centric warfare. Of course, you know, our armed forces have seen this in the past in the war of the 2016, but this has created certain momentum for Azerbaijan. Although I think it's delusional on the part of the Azerbaijani dictatorship to think that with drones, with high precision missiles, with network-centric warfare, they're going to break the resistance or the will of the Nagorno-Karabakh people. It's a simple-minded thinking and delusional thinking. Maybe they could gain some temporary advantages in some parts of the battlefield, but the battle and the war is not over. And as this war goes on more than one month time, we see that incrementally the armed forces of Nagorno-Karabakh and Armenia learn more about this new nature of this new warfare. So it has certain, you know, characteristics, because the people of Nagorno-Karabakh residing on their ancestral land, 150,000 people, confront this immense fighting force against them. And of course, we stand ready as Armenia and Armenian diaspora worldwide to support our compatriots, to support in this unfair, unequal fight against these aggressors, against these three aggressors that right now are fighting against our people. We've seen that also the international mediation efforts so far have not yielded tangible results, although we appreciate very much the mediation efforts by the three co-chair countries, namely United States, Russian Federation, and France. We've seen that they initiated first Russian Federation on October 10th in Moscow, invited the two foreign ministers, and Armenian foreign minister in all good faith negotiated that agreement that was blatantly violated by Azerbaijan. Immediately the ceasefire, the humanitarian ceasefire, entered into force. We see a new reality that the dictatorships in Baku and in Ankara simultaneously, they think that they live in the terms of global disorder, that there is no responsibility. And we have seen Azerbaijani president in the past speaking that who cares about international law, that, you know, international law is not there and the rule of jungle works now. So that's why they feel themselves free to unleash this aggression against the people of Nagorno-Karabakh. And this is not aggression against the military targets of Nagorno-Karabakh. This is an aggression against the civilian settlements and civilian population of Nagorno-Karabakh. So whatever fake claims Azerbaijani dictatorship wants to articulate about its, so to say, good intentions of, towards the people of Nagorno-Karabakh, that they are whatsoever unfounded, that they want to, you know, of course, we should say that, you know, we do not want their so-called generosity about certain unfounded proposals about the status of Nagorno-Karabakh. There cannot be discussion about the Azeri proposals the way they are presenting so-called highest autonomy or cultural autonomy. This is a non-starter for the Armenian or Nagorno-Karabakh side. But the war has been unleashed against the civilians of Nagorno-Karabakh. We have seen indiscriminate bombardments, shellings, including with cluster munitions of Stepanakert, of Shushi, of many other settlements in Karabakh, such as Martakert, Martuni, Hadrut. Wherever we go, we see the traces of Azerbaijani dictators and the Turkish dictators. This is the trace they left on the earth of Nagorno-Karabakh, on the soil of Nagorno-Karabakh. But this is not going to be forgotten. We know one thing, that the war of 1990s, we experienced even tougher times, even worse times. And there were moments when the enemy was at the brink of entering into Stepanakert. But we saw what happened later. This lesson shouldn't be forgotten. So in this sense, of course, Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh, before the war and even right now, we see no alternative to the peaceful resolution of this conflict. We want to resolve this on the basis of mutual compromises or reasonable compromises, but we will never succumb to the unfounded expectations and unrealistic and maximalist expectations of the dictatorship in Baku. These petrodollars can never break the resistance of the Armenian people. We are there to take care of Nagorno-Karabakh, to organize a strong defense, to organize a strong development after the war is over. And we know that Armenian people have seen a lot, and we're going to overcome this challenge as well. So at this moment, of course, as I said, there were 3 attempts of the mediators to establish a ceasefire, at least to go from somewhere, to have a ceasefire and then to return to the negotiating table. And the last one was hosted here in Washington, D.C. by Secretary Pompeo. And we appreciate very much the American side hosting this ministerial summit and trying to put an end to the violence. And we saw that President Trump even congratulated through a tweet the side and said that, you know, an agreement was reached upon in Washington, D.C. And immediately as the ceasefire, after the Washington talks entered into force, Azerbaijan yet another time violates the ceasefire by indiscriminately shelling and bombarding all of the settlements of Nagorno-Karabakh. So here we see what is the level of reliability of Azerbaijan. To what extent we can trust the opponent, in Azerbaijan. That's why all of the claims that Azerbaijan wants to now to offer, so to say, its generous offers to the people of Nagorno-Karabakh, they're absolutely unfounded, baseless, and nobody, of course, can trust this. Having said this, of course, we need to look into this situation from a broader perspective. On one hand, of course, there is the existing reality that we need to the extent possible, to resist this aggression, first of all, through effective defense, through finding out new ways to combat this new nature of warfare that Azerbaijan has brought to the battlefield, namely the drones and high precision missiles. And incrementally, the armed forces of Nagorno-Karabakh learn to new methods of fighting these deadly weapons that has been used, as I said, also towards the civilians. And second of all, the international, of course, the international side of it, to ensure a broad international support for the Armenian cause, for the cause of Nagorno-Karabakh, namely through working on pushing for the right of the people of Nagorno-Karabakh to self-determination. We see now in the worldwide, in many cities and states in Europe, and also here in the United States, a movement towards recognition of the self-determination. So that's an important process, although these are not yet states internationally recognized, but different administrative, subjects in different countries started to. So this is a new process, new phenomena that we're seeing. We see that in the U.S. House of Representatives, there are resolutions introduced about the recognition of the right to self-determination. So these are interesting and new processes that we need to welcome and work on these processes. But of course, there are a lot of challenges. I'll be happy to answer the questions. Once again, I wanted to emphasize the role of the humanitarian outreach of our community through Hayastan Fund, through Pan-Armenian Fund. This is very, very important, and I urge our compatriots to continue the fundraising and their donations to Pan-Armenian Fund, because Pan-Armenian Fund right now is coordinating all of the necessities on the ground, as we have 90,000 refugees in Armenia from Karabakh. So the needs are immense, and the donations of our communities are mostly welcome. With this, I would like to limit my introductory words and to pass the floor back to you, Elizabeth, and I'll be happy later to answer any questions that are from audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you for your time again, but we will have some more questions later. And I would like to say our church is still doing fundraising for Armenia for humanitarian aids, and we'll talk about that at the end. Archbishop Akaisen, thank you for sharing your time with us this evening. And I wonder if you could talk to us about the importance of Artsakh to the Armenian people and to our religion. And also, given your long involvement with the World Council of Churches, Archbishop, can you please tell us how the larger ecumenical movement has responded to this conflict?
Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. I would like to express my thanks and gratitude to Derhair and Van for organizing such an important webinar. And I hope more often we will have the opportunity to have this kind of webinar in different parishes. I will divide my conversation into two parts. One will be national, the other one will be international. Let me start with the national ones. I would say that every single church, the member of National Council of Churches or Christian churches together or Churches for Middle East Peace have made statements about the war, and they all have condemned Azerbaijan and Turkey. Some of them even went a little bit further. They have condemned even those countries who are supporting Azerbaijan with their arms. The second important thing is that one of the most important organizations in this country is National Council of Churches. Actually, yesterday, we had the third statement by the National Council of Churches, which not only condemned, but asked our authorities to take a clear position in solving the problem in Nagorno-Karabakh. So this is in this country. But the third one, again, the Christian Broadcasting Network, who was founded by Pat Robertson, who is a good friend. Unfortunately, he's getting very old. They are also playing very important role in Karabakh, and we are following them. And I think we need some more evangelicals like them to be very open, very honest, and in order to know the reality about what's going on in Karabakh. The second, the international organization that I want to speak about is World Council of Churches and the Churches for the European Council of Churches. They both have made statements. They both have condemned Azerbaijan, Turkey, and all those who are helping them. And next week is our yearly meeting. So we have 5 days of meetings. Before our meeting starts, we are preparing a statement about Karabakh, in which I'm pushing them to use the word phosphorus, war crimes, attacking the residential areas, beheading people, bringing jihadists in, bringing Turkish commandos in, etc., etc., etc. So let's see and wait another week to get to know whether we'll be able to pass that resolution or not. The second important organization in Europe is the European Council of Churches. They also have published a very strong statement, and I'm working with them to publish a second statement. Hopefully that will also come out sometime next week. And the third important point is that I've been in touch with ACT Alliance, which is an organization that represents every member churches of the World Council of Churches, which is 349 churches, to collect money for Armenia. And hopefully we'll get a few $1 million from there. I was in touch with the International Red Cross based in Washington, D.C. They are collecting money for Armenia. And the churches are collecting money for Armenia, and they are sending directly to Armenia Fund, or some of them want to go on their own and help Armenians locally. So yesterday I was sent an email from Geneva telling that Sheikh al-Islam of Azerbaijan, who is the religious leader of Azeri people, has made a statement, a very, very strong statement based on lies and whatever they have done to the Armenian people. He tells to the world that Armenians are doing horrible things, killing their children, destroying their mosques, destroying the temples, destroying the schools, especially accusing Karakin Gatoigos that playing double standard, Armenian diaspora and everything, you know. So the propaganda that they have is enormous, enormous, and we have to get ready for that. And you know, the President Aliyev, that I have seen some of the videos, YouTube, he says, fake news, fake news. I mean, he has learned something from United States, fake news, fake news. The entire propaganda of Azerbaijan is fake news, and Turkey is helping them to do this propaganda. So I don't want to continue anymore, but just want to say, I was watching YouTube, an interview with Dutch parliamentarian. He says, now it's time for the Armenians, each one should be an ambassador in order to be able to go against this fake news and atrocities and the things that is unacceptable that they do to the Armenians, especially phosphorus and bringing in jihadists. I think, Elizabeth, I'll stop here. If there is any question, I'm ready to answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Archbishop. And what you said was actually a very good segue into our conversation with Vaughn. Vaughn, you've worked to educate politicians and the public about Armenian issues for over 40 years. They say that one of the first casualties of war is the truth. Can you tell us, what do you think the U.S. government and the press has gotten right and what they've gotten wrong about this war? And also, what is it that's different about this war than past conflicts with Azerbaijan? I think the ambassador addressed some of that, but maybe you can elaborate too. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Ambassador and Archbishop. In terms of what the United States has gotten right and wrong, and what the media's gotten right and wrong, it's really not that hard to figure out. I think that a lot of the initial media reports were exactly on target. Nobody gave credibility to Azerbaijan's allegations that Armenians somehow left the mountains to go and try to initiate this war with Azerbaijan. Instead, it was very clear that Turkey and Azerbaijan did it. They had the jihadists in place and en route before it happened. The F-16s were already.
Okay, Vaughn is restarting his computer. Something happened there. Let me just ask Vikan Suprazan, could you just tell us a little bit? You mentioned that the religious leader in Azerbaijan has come out with these lies and telling people that we're not, all these terrible things we're doing. Have any of the other Muslim leaders said anything? Have they been constructive at all in trying to help resolve this issue?
No other except the Mufti of Syria has made the statement accusing Azerbaijan of the atrocities. Secondly, two other religious leaders, one from Pakistan, the second one from, I think, must be India, who are accusing Azerbaijan of atrocities, of lies, of every kind of dirty things that are taking place there. Otherwise, we were working to arrange a meeting between Vahapar and Sheikh al-Islam in Geneva, and then it moved to Moscow. Now it moved to Vienna, and I don't think that it could be any helpful anymore to have a meeting with Sheikh al-Islam. But we are working with other religious leaders around the world, to condemn these atrocities committed by the Azeri forces.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I think we have Vaughn back. Vaughn?
I apologize. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
My whole computer turned off, though. I had to restart it. I apologize. So maybe the best thing for me to do is to put my thoughts in context and also just to reflect personally for a minute, because I think not just in the United States, but the whole world is pretty much focused on our presidential elections here and our other elections here. But I think for Armenians around the world and for generations, our eyes are focused on what's going on there. We have friends, close friends, whose sons have died defending Armenians. It is extremely painful, and it obviously brings back the memories we grew up with of the Armenian genocide. And for those of us, with personal connections there as well, it's just truly enraging. And I think we're seeing that throughout the diaspora with the unprecedented activity by people who, not just young Armenians, but Armenians of all ages who are truly outraged at what's going on. And I know we have an audience with different degrees of historical knowledge here, but one thing I think all Armenians can relate to is this commitment that we all had, if anything like the Armenian genocide were going to occur again, then we'd be damned before we let it. And yet that's exactly what we're seeing happen again now. Ambassador was exactly right. There has been a signed ceasefire in effect since 1994. It was breached regularly. It was breached by Azerbaijan again in 2016 during that 4-day war, and it was breached again in July, and again, starting September 27th. And this time, there's no pretense. The position of Azerbaijan and even the president of Turkey, Erdogan, is that they will cease fire when the Armenians are eliminated. Just this week, Reuters reported, that soccer team official had to be disciplined in Europe. He was an Azerbaijani who said, "We must kill all Armenians, children, women, the elderly. We need to kill them without making a distinction. No regrets, no compassion." Supposedly Europeanized person. We saw what happened in France, where a mob of between 150 and 200 Turkish gray wolves were roaming the streets of Lyon looking for Armenians, looking for Armenian places of business. So all of these worst nightmares, it's again, it's part of our identity to protect against these things. And that's what we need to do. And that's what our friends are helping us to do. In terms of what the media got right and what the media got wrong and what governments got right and what governments got wrong, I'd say the initial reporting was all pretty good, in that first wave that Azerbaijan and Turkey launched this attack. The president of France confirmed that his intelligence showed that Turkey and Azerbaijan were using imported jihadists. They were clearly using all kinds of new modern weaponry. As time has worn on, though, we've seen that Azerbaijan's disinformation campaign has really evolved quite a bit. It is not the pure, transactional type that it was, where they would hire lobbyists who would talk about their strategic value and sort of balance things off. Now, where we are and where we expect to be for a very long time is this more sophisticated campaign that almost looks like Turkish denial of the Armenian genocide as it evolved. For example, Armenians were getting hit with these cluster bombs, sort of bombs that drop and leave these small cylinders that effectively work as landmines. And Azerbaijan was doing that, tying red and pink ribbons on them to make them more attractive to children. It's totally against the rules of war, but they went ahead and did it. As soon as that was exposed, they accused Armenians of doing the same thing. They had an absolutely overwhelming campaign, which is continuing, of not just shelling, but also launching rockets and other weapons against civilian areas. And it's been documented, and it was documented in 2016, would put military targets in civilian areas. And then, there was one in town, where it was like the military target was 300 meters away, but then all of a sudden they used their money to blast out there that Armenians were attacking civilians. I think both speakers before me referred to white phosphorus, which has been used and is used in wars, but it's prohibited to be used in civilian areas, causes fires. We've seen them use that to light massive forest fires, and also in areas, that are outside the purposes of war. And as soon as that evidence came out, they immediately accused Armenians of doing the same thing. After President Macron, Russia, Reuters, BBC, and others documented the use of imported terrorists, Azerbaijan then started talking about Armenia importing Kurdish and other terrorists. So, and actually I have a long list there, but I'm sure everybody gets the point. That is a difference. And as we move from the immediacy of the initial war to what's going to be a long-term war, that's something that we have to work against. And that's something that we have to correct. And we have to understand there are going to be people who get paid a lot of money to tell the opposite story. And it's a tried and true tactic to just accuse the other side of doing whatever terrible things you're doing. So there's this, what we call a false equivalence. You know, there's a tendency in modern journalism anyway to say, okay, if we get an account of what happened here, we should now go ahead and give equal credit to what somebody else said, you know? And I think United States audiences are sophisticated enough to see through that, but it doesn't make it any easier when people read it. And we just need to get used to it and prepare ourselves and how to respond, because we do need to respond and respond quickly. With respect to the government, we have deeper problems, honestly. The United States, as Ambassador Nersessian said, is one of the 3 co-chairs charged with mediating a solution. And as such, they have a role as a mediator to play. But the United States is also a country and has its principles and its own foreign policy. When the war first broke out, and I know, you know, there had been a request to do a little bit more of the earlier history. If we have time, we can do it, but I'm not sure we will on this occasion. But I want to focus on some of this recent U.S. history, because this is like the last war, which went, you know, you can say from the pogroms in 1988 through the ceasefire in 1994 for a long period that we should, you know, think about. But then the Senate passed a resolution that is frankly going to sound eerily similar. In 1991, the United States Senate condemned the attacks on innocent children, women, and men in Armenian areas and communities in and around Nagorno-Karabakh and in Armenia, condemns the indiscriminate use of force, including the shelling of civilian areas on Armenia's eastern and southern borders, calls for the end to blockades and other uses of force and intimidation directed against Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh. Then we were calling for the withdrawal of Soviet forces, and calls for dialogue, and then reconfirms, here was the US reconfirming their commitment to the success of democracy and self-determination. That was 1991, when we were in a deep crisis. In 1992, Congress passed, and President Bush, the first President Bush, signed Section 907 where he signed the Freedom Support Act, which included Section 907 that banned U.S. assistance except for democracy building and some other small types of assistance, so long as the government of Azerbaijan is ceasing, so it's prohibited until the president can certify the government has made steps to stop the blockades of both Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh and to cease all other offensive uses of force against Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh. It was a form of recognition as well as a clear sanction provision. So you don't get aid if you do this. In 1993, in reaction to the Turkish blockade of Armenia, which you remember, you know, we were sending goods, United States and people from all over the world after the earthquake. And a lot of those goods never made it through Turkey. They never made it through Baku because the rail system that came to Armenia was going through Baku, and they hijacked all of that. So that banned U.S. assistance to any country that receives U.S. aid that in turn blockades or blocks U.S. assistance to another country. None of that has been enforced. None of that has been enforced, you know, in reaction to these low-level ceasefire violations in relation to the ongoing Turkish and Azeri blockades, and certainly not in reaction to this major outbreak, which everybody ascribes, and Aliyev proudly says there is a military solution and that they will eliminate the Armenians. You know, so Maya Angelou just made that great observation. When somebody tells you who they are, you should believe them. there is no excuse for any American government official or any media representative to not believe Erdogan and Aliyev when they say who they are. And if they had an initial feeling that they should be, conduct this false equivalency, then they should look at what they do. And when you do that, then I think action is required. What's been a deeper problem has been that since 2018, United States, which had, by agreement, always given equal military assistance to both Armenia and to Azerbaijan, secretly and circumventing Congress, gave an extra more than $100 million of military assistance to Azerbaijan. And we now know that a fair amount of that, including people trained with that money, have been involved in these attacks against Armenians. The question is, what can we do? The question is, what can we do? Everybody has different gifts. Everybody has different talents. But every single one of you, every single Armenian is going to have to learn enough about this situation to be able to speak intelligently about it. Armenians have gone through the history not only of the pain of the Armenian genocide, but also the pain of the denial of the Armenian genocide, where people, who would otherwise be respectable, in some cases scholars, in many cases politicians, would say the Armenian genocide never happened, it's a myth. If it did happen, the Armenians deserved it. And oh, by the way, similar to what we're seeing now, saying, it was actually the Armenians that killed the Turks, and there were more Muslim deaths than there were Armenian Christian deaths. It took us a very long time to overcome that. We did that, finally. There is a clear consensus. It was a lifetime, more than a lifetime's of work to get there. Your kids, your grandkids, if we don't win this fight, are going to be faced with a backwards history. Ambassador talked about fake news. It's not just fake news, it's absolute rewriting of history, and not just rewriting, but reversal of history. Armenians expect the ceasefire agreement to be respected. If Azerbaijan and Turkey won't respect a ceasefire agreement, how can they be trusted on anything else? If we look at it in context, we look at this in context, we look at Turkey's genocidal policies against Kurds. We look at what Turkey has done in Iraq. We look at what Turkey has done in Syria. We look at what Turkey is a country that complains, or the Erdogan regime, I'm not generalizing for all Turks, of course. The Erdogan regime regularly says that the rest of the world has an anti-Muslim bias, and yet the Hagia Sophia, which was clearly a Christian church, he converted back into a mosque, and omits the fact that Turkey used to have a substantial Christian minority, even in many areas a majority. On the one hand, they say it's a multicultural country. On the other hand, they forget to mention that they eliminated all of the Christians through genocide. And then they go and say, well, you're just anti-Muslim. That's not the case. It's absolutely not the case. In terms of what we can expect from our government and should expect from our government, I think that, using U.S. taxpayer money to fund weapons and training of people who are beheading Armenians and doing things the United States says it's against, people who are funding terrorists, international terrorists, to cross borders, travel through Turkey, all well documented. Some of them have been captured and given confessions and reports and everything else. That just needs to stop. That's not unreasonable. These are our tax dollars. Second, I read you Section 907. The United States needs to enforce the law as written. we don't know how the election is going to, while we've been on this call, before we got on this call, we didn't have certainty as to how the election was going to turn out, but Vice President Biden and Senator Harris called for enforcement of Section 907, and regardless, that's what we're expecting. It's the law. For U.S. F-16s to be sitting in an airport in Azerbaijan, and at least on 2 occasions having taken to the air and fired missiles against Armenians, violates a bunch of other laws. And I can see that I'm going on a little bit too long, so I'll try to go quickly. That military assistance that went to Azerbaijan has to be increased to Armenia now. And that U.S. assistance that goes to Armenia also has to have a component that includes, once again, as it historically did, U.S. assistance to Nagorno-Karabakh. We're asking to be fair. I know we covered a lot of ground. I appreciate very much what our church has done. I'm very, very proud to be a member of our church. I am very proud to have Ambassador Nersessian and Vikan Surpazan as close friends. I'm really just very proud, and I'll just end it right there. I know our church has a matching fund, and that's going to be talked about, but anything that people can do will be greatly appreciated. And just so there's no mistake, more is going to be expected of you. So the sooner you jump in, the better. Thank you.
Thank you, Vaughn. Thank you very much. We do have a number of questions that were emailed to us in advance, so I would like to get to a few of those. I know our time is running short. I will pose the question, and then if one of our panelists would like to jump in and answer, that would be great. So the first question we have is there any plan that could be put forward to Azerbaijan by Armenia that could be a potential starting point for meaningful discussions to begin, other than a request for a ceasefire? Any such plan might require some concessions on the Armenian side or Artsakh side. Or is this totally out of the question?
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth, and thanks to Vigan and Van for excellent presentations. In regard to the plan, of course, Armenia has its own vision in Nagorno-Karabakh about how to settle this issue. We definitely want the issue to be resolved on the basis of reasonable compromises. Of course, the core issue of the status of Nagorno-Karabakh is crucial, an issue that Azerbaijan consistently tries to avoid, to find false solutions to that issue, because the root cause of this conflict is the status that is ignored and denounced and denied by Azerbaijan. So our plan is based on the notion of the status of Nagorno-Karabakh. With status, also the security comes, and the rest. So that's why our plan is based on reasonable compromises, not like the Azerbaijani vision, which is only unilateral concessions and only gains for them, but nothing for Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh. That's not going to work. Our plan, of course, is about mutual compromises and rests on the fundamental notion of the status. Thank you. Perhaps this will limit my, comment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. The next question, what is the legal and political strategy towards those companies supplying spare parts for drones to Azerbaijan and Turkey?
I think Van can answer, yeah.
I'll take that. It's a good question, and I think that it's not only a question about companies that have supplied component parts. First of all, we can look at Canada. Canada immediately closed arms exports to Turkey. The United States should be doing the same. Turkish military has been actively involved in this. Turkish military equipment has been actively involved in it. With respect to U.S. equipment and U.S. exports, the Arms Export Control Act prohibits re-export of those regulated items unless there's a permit allowing it to be re-exported. So if the United States allows a weapon to be sold to Turkey, for example, because it's a NATO ally, it doesn't mean Turkey can go and sell it wherever or provide it wherever it wants. It can't, and we're having that problem now. Another component of this is what private companies do in terms of their sales, some of which is for military use, some of it is for dual use. The bigger and the biggest problem really is, as Ambassador mentioned, the use of corrupted funds. It's called the Azerbaijan laundromat, where they take the oil money and bribes, and then in turn use that to bribe and influence public officials. So the consortium of investigative journalists that exposed $2.3 billion in bribes and influence payments in Europe, and $500 million of that made its way to the United States. We have also a situation that's increasingly exposed with BP, British Petroleum, and the outsized investment and interest and influence that it has in Azerbaijan, and how it is effectively disregarding all of its corporate, so-called corporate social responsibility obligations to go ahead and not only fund, but actively promote this genocidal campaign against Armenians. Then, I don't know, I'll stop there. Otherwise, it could go on.
All right. I'll take a couple more. I know that Archbishop Akazin might have to drop off. I know, but we'll try to take another question or two. What are the advantages and disadvantages of keeping the negotiation process under the auspices of the Minsk Group, and what could possibly trigger an exploration of political or legal solutions?
You want the Archbishop to answer, or?
No, I think
It's,
you may have to.
I'll take that question.
It's very difficult. It's very difficult for me to answer this kind of
I'll
question.
take Vigen Sepazan.
Ambassador and
absolutely. So the advantages, thank you. The advantages of that, the Minsk Group co-chairs, first of all, there shouldn't be misunderstanding. It is not that we're perfectly happy or satisfied with the Minsk Group proposals in the past, but of course we understand that this is the main institution that is able and capable to deliver a peaceful solution. Unlike Azerbaijan, we support fully the activities of the co-chairs, Russia, United States, and France, as mediators, and we trust their activities. We do not want that structure to be undermined by Azerbaijan. We saw that prior to the outbreak of the war, Azerbaijani president denounced them and said that their activities are meaningless. And he wants to create double tracks, alternative forums for shopping. And all of this has been the case in the past and have been failed, and they're going to fail. The Minsk Group is the only, OSCE Minsk Group co-chairs is the only international body. First of all, it's mandated by the international community to deal with this conflict, and they are capable. By the way, this is one of the unique forums where Russia and United States, unlike in many other forums, have a full understanding and cooperation for resolving this conflict. So, and this has been recognized by Russia, by United States and France. So they are a very good, institution, and we want them to carry on, to carry on. Again, we're not perfectly happy. It's not our dream scenarios that they have produced, but we understand that this is the only forum where we can try to address the root causes and find a peaceful solution with the help of the mediators. There shouldn't be exaggerated and expectations that the co-chairs are going to have a magic wand and produce a magic solution like Azerbaijan wants to have in favor of it. It's up to the parties to get use of the co-chairs' ability to deliver solutions and in a flexible way to negotiate and to find out a peaceful solution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me just, Elizabeth, if I could just say two things there, and I think it will also answer This was a good question that popped up in the chat as well. Maybe I can meld the two. That, you know, the Prime Minister of Armenia needs to be given some credit for saying, and this is a point that every Armenian should take to heart, saying the solution needs to be acceptable to the people of Azerbaijan, as well as the people of Nagorno-Karabakh and the people of Armenia. That is a statement that is rejected by Azerbaijan and Turkey. So regarding Jack's question here, you know, this is very much a war and a conflict that fits into a pattern that you see with an authoritarian leader, you know, transitioning to dictatorship, which may well be already, who's corrupt, who's telling people, don't pay attention to the money I'm stealing, don't pay attention to my iron grip on power, you should go and blame this other group. And the historic parallels are clear to all of us here. That's on the Azerbaijani side. On the Turkish side, we saw that too, starting with President Erdogan's comments in May, but there too, you have the behavior of an authoritarian who causes problems, and the way he deals with them is to go and get involved in another problem to take everybody's mind off of it. So even if Nagorno-Karabakh were solved, and this is why I'm very realistic about how this is going to be with us for the rest of our lives, that even if Nagorno-Karabakh is solved, these dictatorships are going to need to keep blaming Armenians as a distraction. And politically, for their internal political purposes, you know, some of the best evidence of the cost-free nature that they expect from doing that, because it is a classic pattern of such leaders, is that the war dead from Azerbaijan are disproportionately from other minorities in Azerbaijan and from areas not in Aliyev, so not in the leader's base. So they're not from the Nakhichevan area, they're not from Baku. They're taking other people, so his political base isn't so concerned. Okay, I know we're over our time, so I'll stop.
Thank you. I just have one more quick question I wanted to get in before I let everyone go. One of the questions we got emailed to us was, how can we constructively address Turkey's standing in NATO? Because I've been to some of these rallies. That's an issue on a lot of people's mind is Turkey and NATO. And is that something we can...
Sure, we can say it briefly. Turkey has not behaved like a NATO ally for a very long time. You know, it is not just pursuing its own interests, but pursuing this regime's interest outside of the accepted rules. Turkey became the lifeline to ISIS. ISIS would not have been around without Turkey. Some of the terrible things that, you know, Turkey claims other people do, it does itself. It has not been a loyal ally, and NATO, as our friend David Phillips at Columbia says, is not just a military alliance, but it's an alliance of democracies. And that's just not the case there. The NATO documents do not have a provision for removing a NATO member. Secretary of State Kerry actually made that point. But if NATO were being formed again, Turkey would not qualify for membership. And I think it's crystal clear that they long since gave up on European Union membership and have other more ambitious targets and more destructive targets in mind.
Thank you. Well, we've come to the end of our time. I'd like to thank our audience for tuning in. I'd like to give special thanks to Ambassador Nersessian for being here, Archbishop Baykazin, who has stepped off, and Von Krikorian for participating tonight. Before we sign off for the evening, though, I'd like to remind everyone that we are raising money for humanitarian efforts in Armenia. As Ambassador Nersessian said, there are lots of refugees who are in Armenia, lots of people who are injured. We're going to put up our website. You can make a donation to St. Gregory the Enlightener, and we will send the money on to the Highest End Fund, or you can make a donation directly to the Highest End All Armenia Fund. As Vaughn said, this is going to, you are going to be called on again and again to support these humanitarian efforts. We don't see an immediate end to this, but we know a lot of you have already given generously in the past, and we ask you to continue to keep on giving. I'd like to thank our panelists once again, and I hope everybody has a wonderful evening, and please stay apprised of what's happening in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Great job. Thank
For
you.
being a great moderator. Thank you. Thanks, Van.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, dear Mesro. Bye. Bye, everyone. Good night.